So before we actually get into today's video, I want to talk to you guys about jerseyfifa.com, because as you can see, they have hooked me up with a load of fresh shirts for this year's World Cup. I've got the England home kit, the England away kit, and also a nice little retro shirt. And you can do exactly the same if you head to jerseyfifa.com using the link in the description down below. They also do the same for club football as well. The latest home shirts, away shirts, but also some really nice retro kits. If you are interested, head to the link in the description down below and use code jerseyfifa for a discount when you order. Now into the video. Hey guys, welcome back to the AJ Analysis channel, where today we have an analysis video on the two top teams in England, maybe even in Europe, maybe in the world, going head to head in the FA Cup in the game, of course, last night. Now, it's a little bit weird that we are now in late January and we've only now seen these two teams going head to head, with them yet to play each other in the league. A lot of build up coming into this game. I was really looking forward to it. I don't think it quite lived up to expectations in terms of entertainment, but the only reason for that was because the tactics were very much on point from a defensive point of view. This was two managers kind of knowing what the other manager wanted to do and therefore nullifying that. So, whilst it may not have been the most entertaining in terms of tons of chances, it was still quite interesting tactically. So, of course, that is what we are going to be looking at today. And we will start with when Manchester City had the ball, because this was the phase of play, particularly early on in the game. A lot of the early periods, the early exchanges, were Manchester City trying to get out from the back. Now, when City try and play out from the back, we know what they're doing at the moment. They shift to more of a back three, with Ake and Stones the wider players, and we see Rico Lewis shift into midfield. Again, it shows the quality of Rico Lewis, the trust that Guardiola has in him to play him in a big game like this. The problem this creates for City though, is that there's a lack of width in their initial play-out phase, which for me made it too easy for Arsenal to put them under pressure. Because it means that Trossard can match up on Stones, Saka on Ake, Vieira on Rodri, and Xhaka on Lewis. And as you can see, that's man for man. That's really difficult to play through from a Manchester City point of view, especially when you haven't got someone like Laporte, who is of course elite as a ball-playing centre-back. It made it quite difficult for City to play through these areas, and the thing with this Arsenal squad is not only are they tactically smart enough to go man for man, physically they're also a very aggressive team, but just very athletic. This is a very physical Arsenal side. I think it's potentially something which is a little bit underappreciated with this team. They are very physical. Yes, there's a lot of technicians all over the pitch, but when they go man for man with you, it's very hard to cope with the intensity. Fortunately for City, they are probably one of the few teams in the world that can do it because of how technically good they are. However, even they struggled in these opening exchanges, which again means Arteta deserves credit, because this press that he's got going with Arsenal is really, really good at the moment. I think another one of the issues for Manchester City in terms of playing out from the back was the lack of Bernardo Silva in the team. For me, Bernardo Silva is one of the most press-resistant players in the world when he drops into these areas. He has an ability to get the ball and then turn away from his man, something which Manchester City didn't really have. And the problem for me is the shape, because like I said, there is no width, which means then Mahrez has to drop really deep to try and get the ball, and as does Grealish on the other side. The question is, why is that happening? I think it's easy to point out that that happened, and that is all that some people will do. But I want to try and figure out the why, and this doesn't necessarily just focus on this game. I think this is a Haaland problem. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to criticise Haaland. We will come back onto him because he actually had a really good game. However, I do think that this shape comes as the consequence of having Erling Haaland in the team. We know that Pep Guardiola likes to have a box midfield. We can see it here with Rodri, Gundogan, De Bruyne and Rico Lewis. He likes to generate this four in midfield. Now, the way that he's done that in the past is by having a false nine up front, someone like Phil Foden. And Phil Foden drops into these areas, and let's say Gundogan's here, De Bruyne's like this. And Manchester City have got their box midfield, they've still got the width, but they also now have the extra player at the back to play out with because of the fullback. Because he doesn't really trust Haaland to do this job, Haaland stays higher. It means that Manchester City have to find someone else to do that, and at the moment that is Rico Lewis. And like I said, for me that is causing a bit of a problem at the moment, because City just didn't really know how to get out from the back. Arsenal continue to be intense in their man-for-man press. Of course, the fullbacks are going to match onto the wingers. We saw Gabriel being really aggressive on De Bruyne, Partey following Gundogan, and then holding up against Haaland. But this was a key battle in the first half, because Manchester City, whilst they were under pressure, they still have an ability to go long, particularly from Ortega at the back, who again I thought had a good game. And the target was always Haaland against Holding. Now, whilst Haaland does have that deficiency in the sense to this Manchester City team, how he doesn't drop deep and link the play, he does offer something different like this. He offers that ability to go long. And whilst Haaland didn't score in this game, I think this is the best I've seen him without scoring. So I think in previous games for Manchester City, when he hasn't scored, he's looked a little bit ineffective, a little bit isolated. I thought he played really, really well in this game. And his duels up against Holding, it really was a mismatch. So much so that Arteta bought Holding off at half-time to get Saliba on. Haaland genuinely was absolutely brilliant, and he really is a physical monster. The Arsenal players were doing everything to try and foul him to bring him down. Some of the decisions were being given the other way, which I thought was a little bit odd. But yeah, Haaland, absolute quality throughout the game. Now, of course, when you have this ability to go long to someone like Haaland, who then is going to hold the ball up or certainly win a second ball for your team, what it allows you to do is it basically drags your team forward. If Haaland's getting on this ball and challenging, it means De Bruyne can then get around the second ball. And when Manchester City are able to do that, it means that they have now bypassed the Arsenal press. And like I said, when you've got a quality player like De Bruyne then picking up the second ball with runners in Mahrez and Grealish, Manchester City suddenly go from looking under pressure at the back during the press when Arsenal have got them contained to suddenly one long ball, Haaland has won his duel, and now suddenly Manchester City are in. This is where Haaland offers them a different dynamic. The problem for City from here was that, to be honest, they just weren't really direct enough. They were a bit too passive, which has been a criticism of mine of this Manchester City team this season. They lacked that willingness to really go at a man. Grealish and Mahrez, I want to see you take on your man. They didn't really do that enough for me, and as a result, Arsenal were able to deal with them for most of the game until about the hour mark. So by this time, Thomas Partey had already come off for Arsenal because of an injury, something which Arteta will be concerned about, but Pep Guardiola was quite bold with his changes. He brought Kyle Walker on for Rico Lewis at right back, and he also brought Alvarez on for Riyad Mahrez, and essentially went either for a 4-4-2, a 4-2-2, or a 4-2-4. Probably the latter, in my opinion. Now, this was almost, dare I say it, Pep Guardiola sacrificing control a little bit in exchange for being a bit more direct. They now had Laporte on for the injured John Stones. Laporte is a much more vertical centre-back. They had Alvarez, who is much more direct in the way that he plays, always making runs off the ball, always getting into different areas, asking questions of defenders. And they also had Kyle Walker on at right back, who held the width a lot more. So City still, at times, were using the same build-up shape in a back three, like this, with them Rodri and Gundogan in front. But now Walker was playing much wider. Firstly, it made it a bit easier for City to get out from the back, because now they had this width option with De Bruyne also pushing forward. Arsenal now struggle to match up with them down this side of the pitch. But also, when you have width and an option like Kyle Walker, like I said, it just stretches the pitch much bigger and it makes it much more difficult for your defence to deal with. Now we can see that Manchester City are able to generate a front 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up against an Arsenal back 4. And I've been speaking about it a lot this season. If you can get a 5 versus 4 where you're in the channels, it's going to lead to chances. And we did eventually see it with Alvarez popping up in this little pocket, having a shot at goal. So it wasn't necessarily, this tactical change didn't directly lead to a goal because of course it was a second ball which Grealish done well with, laid it off to Ake who finished. So it wasn't necessarily the tactical change that directly led to the goal. However, it certainly had an influence in the build-up. It came from Manchester City being able to get through the press a little bit easier, allowing them to progress the ball forward, the directness of Alvarez, that willingness to have the shot from distance. So for me, the substitutes from Pep Guardiola really changed this game, and they always looked a more threatening team. For me, they deserve to win, but I do just want to take a quick look at Arsenal. So for me, this wasn't the Arsenal we've seen so far this season. Yes, they still had that intensity off the ball, but on the ball, while still being quite energetic and direct with the way that they played, it wasn't the same team that we've been seeing recently. There wasn't that same crispness on the ball. In fact, let's take Saliba out because it was Rob Holding in the early stages. There wasn't that same quality on the ball, and that came because Arsenal did rotate. Holding isn't Saliba. Tomiyasu isn't as good as Ben White on the ball. Tierney isn't as tactically adaptable as what Zinchenko is. And Trossard for Martinelli, to be fair, is a change, but you know it's not too much of a drop in quality. However, in general, Arsenal did suffer from a drop in quality. And like Manchester City, they did struggle to get the ball through the press at times. Manchester City went to a 4-4-2, and whereas Arsenal were very direct and man-to-man with their press, City used a different pressing method, more of a shadow press. So Haaland and De Bruyne are matching up with the centre-backs as a front two, but also they are shadow pressing Thomas Partey. So they don't just sprint in a straight line, they curve their run slightly, which means Holding can't then come back in this way to Partey. He then has to go wide, and they've done a really good job of stopping Thomas Partey from getting on the ball. But the problem for Arsenal was, this is where they really missed Tierney. Because they still had this back three. Tomiyasu is capable of tucking in on the right-hand side. But normally, if you can't get the ball to Partey, Zinchenko's in this area. He's always inverting into these areas where you've then got the extra man. It makes it harder for the front two to press. Tierney didn't want to do that, and I don't think was even asked to do that. He was spending a lot of his game much wider, much higher up the pitch. And instead it was almost Xhaka dropping into these areas. But again, Xhaka doesn't have that same technical ability which Zinchenko does. And for me, that was the biggest problem for Arsenal. I don't massively want to go into them tactically because I just don't think they were that impressive in the game. I thought City were the better team. But for me, I don't think they deserve criticism. I don't think we should sit here and say Guardiola outclassed Arteta or Arteta got it wrong. This was a case of Arsenal rotating because of course they want to win the Premier League, but they just don't have that quality and depth to do it. And in Tomiyasu and Tierney, changing your fullbacks like this made them so much weaker. We know that Arsenal's fullbacks are some of their most important players this season. The timing of run forward from Ben White in this area down the right hand side, but Zinchenko tucking in from the left, wasn't replicated by Tierney and Tomiyasu, and for me, ultimately that was what cost Arsenal their rhythm. Like I said, Thomas Partey struggled to get on the ball. Vieira doesn't have that same physical attribute that Odegaard does, the ability to shrug off a man and move the ball forward. So a bit of a disappointing night for Arsenal, but I don't think Arsenal fans will mind too much. I think they know their focuses are elsewhere. But as for Manchester City, they progress in the FA Cup, and yeah, they'll be confident that they can go all the way and win it, but we will of course have to wait and see if that happens or not. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Who did you think was the better team? What did you make of the tactical switches? Do you think Arteta was right to rotate his team a little bit? Let me know all of that in the comment section down below. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the video, and as always, I will see you in the next one.